Good morning, and I'm not sure John will get there in 12 months. I'd like to start off by thanking the Bus Industry Confederation for inviting me and having this great opportunity to not only learn more about your industry, but obviously to hear some of the impressive work that Singapore is doing and to spend some time talking about what we're doing in New South Wales as well. I think it's often interesting that industries and probably challenging for industries to invite regulators to your conferences, and I guess from the point of view of Sal Petrosito and from the NHVR and David Anderson from NTC and myself, I'm sure they agree with me that you are a very mature industry, the bus and coach industry, and one that's really embracing policy change and working with all of us across the sector in partnerships, and partnerships something that we're dealing a lot with in New South Wales, and I'd like to talk a little bit more about that as well. But you're always ready to help, and I know in my own case in recent times, Bus New South Wales and others, we've worked very closely together on issues such as safety, issues such as access, new vehicle design, and it's really important that we continue to work that way, so I'm really pleased to be here. I also like to put in a plug to start with as well. Yesterday in New South Wales we announced the commencement of a process to introduce a BRT from the northern beaches into the city in Sydney, so I welcome all of industry to get involved in that process, and you can see that information on the Transport for New South Wales website if you look it up. And in addition to that, only last week the Transport Minister announced that in Newcastle we're going to have a bus, ferry and future light rail services contract, and some discussion on that as well. And I think they're very positive changes to our transport environment in New South Wales. Just by way of context, Transport for New South Wales is the overarching body and has been for the last 4 years, and the cluster agency, if you like, for the planning and program for the transport outcomes right across New South Wales and Sydney indeed. And hence we get products such as a long-term transport master plan and flowing onto a state infrastructure strategy. And I think that's a very important piece of planning for the future and really sets us up well. My own role with Roads and Maritime Services, I'm looking after the delivery agency that has 3 major responsibilities. That's building infrastructure, maintaining that infrastructure and the current infrastructure, and also we call it managing journeys. And in the old days we would have had a focus just on the asset, but our focus is actually on the customer and how we manage the customer's experience on our networks, whether that's the roads or waterways. I won't focus on waterways today, but on the road network, we want to ensure safe and efficient journeys for every customer, whether they're in your facilities, on our networks, or on other public transport modes. So to get to road pricing, I'd really like to start by thanking Professor John Stanley and Mr. Leonard Tan today, both of whom have been major contributors towards the thinking and management of road pricing, road demand through the use of market-based tools associated with road pricing. I think listening this morning, you can well hear that John Stanley has been a long-standing advocate for road pricing reforms. He's told me many, many years, and I won't go into the details of that, only talking this morning, but also increasing charges on heavy freight vehicles to better match the direct and external costs by the road freight transport sector, and we've had good experience there. As we've heard from Leonard Tan, road pricing in Singapore has led the world in this field and has been variously used to limit the number of cars on the road. We've heard yesterday and today, ensure a modern and low-polluting road fleet, fund and drive demand for public transport, and ensure road assets are continuously maintained to high standards, and I'm sure that's what we all want. And also, the networks are regularly improved or supplemented to meet that demand. Since the introduction of electronic road pricing in Singapore, ERP has developed, as we've heard, to apply variable tolls to maintain traffic flow and reduce congestion. In New South Wales, this is not a new concept, the concept of tolls. And I need to start at the beginning because this has been a very long history of user pays pricing. The first main roads in New South Wales were constructed by Governor Lachlan Macquarie in the 1800s. New South Wales' first main road, which is now Parramatta Road, for those that are familiar with Sydney, had toll gates at Broadway in the city and also at Beckett's Creek, out near the Church Street interchange on the M4 at Parramatta. So we were there a long time ago. Road pricing has existed in various forms since the very beginnings of Australia's road network, and often in an indirect way as well. Issues such as fuel taxes and excise duties, vehicle registration and driver licensing fees, car park levies, and motorway infrastructure tolls, which, as we've heard this morning, are a more direct way of user pays. In Australia, user-paid toll charges have been primarily used for the purpose of bringing forward infrastructure, so we can have today and pay off tomorrow, if you like, if you like taking out a loan. Just to give you a bit of an idea, in recent years, road funding in New South Wales has averaged about $5 billion. It's a massive number. Really coincidentally, however, about the cost of road congestion in our state's around the $5 billion mark, which is quite an interesting figure. And coincidentally, nationally and from a state point of view, we recover about $5.5 billion from the road user to go towards this funding. So it seems to all match up. The current year, however, we're spending $6.8 billion. And you might think that's some sort of bloated bureaucracy. It's not. In the past 4 years, as a new entity, we've been through an enormous amount of reform. And that graph there simply shows you where the different funding comes from, be it state consolidated fund, Commonwealth funds, Roads and Maritime's own revenue and commercial activities, and motor vehicle taxes. Our reform process, however, has demanded, and the government has demanded, we make cuts. So we've reduced our operating budget by over $180 million per year, and that's a sustainable cut and goes into the future, and our staffing by between 25 and 35%. But where the big change is in the investment and capital. So we were averaging in the last few years around $2 billion a year in investment in new infrastructure. This year it will be $4 billion. And that goes up for a total budget in 2 years' time to $10 billion. So a major change and a major investment. And I'll talk a little bit further too about the new motorways. That doesn't cover the PPP for North Connects or some of the funding for West Connects as well. So there is a major investment going into regional roads, finishing off the job of the Pacific Highway motorway conditions all the way to Queensland by 2019, extensions to the Princes Highway, the Newell Highway, and further refinements to the Hume. So there's major changes underway. But I'd just like to say that over the next 4 years, we'll be spending $16 billion. And a lot of that funding has come through either asset sales or other backlog investment that's been required. It's not making a case, however, for not doing road pricing. What I'm simply saying is we're massively investing at the moment. I must also say, at the same time, we're putting about $1.5 billion into the maintenance of the system. So we're looking at that and we're ensuring that the existing system is well maintained, and in the future, how we can get more out of that system as well. So we're going to be spending about $400 million on easing congestion and smart motorway concepts. So variable speed limits on our motorways in urban areas, ramp metering, and better congestion management. This slide is simply just the motorway network, which you'll all be well familiar with in Sydney. So the major tollways in Sydney started with the Sydney Harbour Bridge after Parramatta Road, but the Sydney Harbour Bridge opened in 1932 and involved a toll of 6 pence. The toll now varies between $2.50 and $4. The Sydney Harbour Bridge and now the Sydney Harbour Tunnel are also the only toll roads in Australia where congestion-based tolling, or that concept, has been used in an effort to limit traffic during peak hours. Whether that difference is enough to make an impact or not is probably the question, but that's why it was introduced. The F3 motorway to the north of Sydney, now known as the M1, towards the Central Coast of Newcastle, was opened in December 1965, and it had a 20-cent toll payable to toll booths just near the Hawkesbury River, and that was in place until 1988. The F6 to the southern area, the tollway project there from Waterfall to Bulli between Sydney and Wollongong, was financed by the state government bonds and was tolled between 1975 and 1995. Since the late 1980s, there's been a significant improvement in the road network, and much needed motorway projects have been built using public-private partnerships. and different delivery partnerships. This started with the construction of the Sydney Harbour Tunnel, completed in 1987, the completion of the M4 in Sydney's West in 1992, M5 to Sydney's southwest progressively opened and completed in 92, the M2, Sydney's northwest, opened in 97, Eastern Distributor to the south opened in 99, the Sydney Orbital 2005, Cross City Tunnel and more recently Lone Cove Tunnel in 2007. This trend has continued with the recent widening and expansion of the M2 and M5, all paid for out of tolls, and in this case, in those two widening processes, to get that more capacity, we actually extended the concession by a few years, and that's how we get the return on that. There's been issues associated with risk allocation and traffic modelling, and that arose with Cross City Tunnel and Lane Cove tunnels, and it's resulted in increasingly sophisticated procurement methods, such as we're seeing on WestConnex, and a greater focus on partnership and shared outcomes. This is evidenced, as I said, by the use of independent boards, joint delivery KPIs, the NorthConnex project, and the transformational work on the WestConnex project. So there's been much discussion in the last 10 years, amplified in more recent times, and Professor John Stanley has been a leader in this area. Also, we're now getting Australia's leading transport asset owner and infrastructure operator Transurban in the space, your own BIC, Infrastructure Partners Australia, Roads Australia, and a range of seminars and presentations on this issue. Transurban, however, have taken an interesting step in implementing a trial involving 1,200 volunteers in Melbourne. The trial would test 3 different pricing models over a 12-month period. This is a genuine, I think, and welcome effort to add to the theory and to real-world tangible data on how road pricing will work in our communities. Infrastructure Partners Australia had also raised recently and focused attention on the growing gap between declining revenues from existing funding sources, particularly fuel excises, arising from improvements in fuel consumption, technology and efficiency, and the growing financial demands, as I've said, for maintenance and supplementation of our infrastructure. Their analysis outlines a lack of detail in the current knowledge base in Australia and calls for more trials like the one being undertaken in Melbourne, as well as more detailed asset condition and economic analysis. And that's happening both at state and national level now in national forums. We also, as well as harmonisation of the different state charging regimes for registration and licensing of both light and heavy vehicles, with heavy vehicles taking the lead in that area. In New South Wales, distance-based tolling has been applied on one motorway only, the M7, the Western Sydney Orbital project, but I can assure you that will continue with the new WestConnex and NorthConnex projects. We've recently developed a much stricter regime across all of our motorways tolls for heavy vehicles to assist in the construction and maintenance costs of those assets. However, the ad hoc nature of the development of the motorway process in Australia, involving different owners, different operators, different concession terms and funding models, has to date made it difficult to end up with a good and healthy discussion on rationalisation of motorway tolling across our networks. At this stage, the Australian public is aware of those that we heard about this morning, such as London, the congestion tax, and other areas of Europe, but has not shown any favour to congestion-based tolling. As I hear, and I've heard this morning and I've heard at other times, industry, we suggest that this is an ideal way to fund improved public transport, to reduce congestion, to reduce travel times, to drive behavioural change amongst motorists, and to reduce pollution by reducing car usage. But almost all of these discussions are ourselves talking to ourselves, whether that's as industry experts, academics, road owners, motorists, motorist groups, road toll operators, all of us in a way that have a very close interest in this. So far, the broader community has not been brought on the journey, and my view is that is the next step. So my challenge to those proposing change and reform is to learn the lessons from places like Singapore, London, but particularly learn from the experience of London, supplement this with local trials, detailed research, then mount the public case for change. We can't simply expect local government, state or federal politicians to lead the drive for change to the way revenue is collected and roads are funded without a solid evidence base. without a well-articulated case for change, without active support from industry, a cohesive industry support for it, and a broad body of public support for change. Governments, and indeed oppositions, will not take up our position unless we do that. But what has been happening, there has been a preparedness to embrace toll roads where people have seen direct benefits in road network being delivered faster than previously possible and reducing congestion. There has, since the early 90s, as I've explained, been a view that there should always be a good tollway in place, but a free alternative, a government-funded alternative to any toll road. This is a constraint to those who propose changes towards road pricing, as we've now experienced in Sydney. The New South Wales publics also supported the special fuel excise levy in the past, in the 1990s, because the revenue generated was hypothecated to regional road improvements and safety programs such as the black spot programs. The public could see where the money was going. The logic of using tolls to drive behavioural change only works when there's a strong public transport alternative. Sydney is a vast city. Australia is a vast nation. In New South Wales, the public transport system is improving rapidly, and I'm pleased to say that. But there's a long way to go before it represents a genuine alternative to driving for most commuters, particularly in the outer parts of Sydney. Nonetheless, the New South Wales community has shown over 2 centuries of roads history that is prepared to embrace both direct and indirect road pricing, and it's prepared to embrace change if the case is made by the proponents to the community. Conferences such as this add to the pool of wisdom and shared experiences that can only improve the quality of discussion. And I believe it needs to be a discussion, not a debate, and a good discourse. In my organisation, New South Wales Roads and Maritime, we are overseeing the construction of a massive West Connects and North Connects motorway projects. We'll watch the space closely to ensure that road pricing systems are designed to maximise the efficiency of the Sydney motorway operations and opportunities. That final slide, or final 2 slides, is showing you the mountain of work we've got to do, and that's what we've naturally focused on. But it's out the other end that we really need to position ourselves for the future. And then finally, this slide shows you the development in the darker blue part of the West Connects to the North Connects, and the green areas out near Badgerys Creek in Western Sydney shows the area and the road network that's going to be improved with federal funding, over $3.6 billion over the next 4 years. So you can see where our efforts are going at the moment, but we've got an eye to the future. So I'd like to thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity today, and I'm particularly looking forward to looking at the road pricing in action, the ERP in Singapore tomorrow. Thank you.